are, hi, who are, wave to your professor to make sure they're paying attention. There you go. If you're in Professor Cranbuell, Samra, Aramis, or Dr. Brophy's class or my class, there's a sign-in sheet over by the window, so make sure you sign in. We'll also be taking sign-ins from students from other classes as well. There's a sheet that says other, so you can sign in and we'll make copies and send to your teachers. So we're so excited that you're here today. We decided to have this event in the cafeteria because we kind of wanted it to be a place where people could walk through or drop in or have it be less than a formal presentation. We're gonna talk a little bit about the grant that the faculty participated in to create your classes. Then each of the faculty are gonna speak. We're gonna have some dialogue. And before students leave today, we're gonna do an activity at the tables among students to get some really important feedback from you for where we go from here. Because if there's one thing the faculty has learned in working on this grant, it's that we can sit around in meetings and make up whatever we want, but when we actually sit down with our students and work with them and listen to them, the direction of what we think we were gonna do usually changes because our students are amazing and brilliant and have a lot of times better ideas than we do. So that's sort of the point today, is listening and working with you to change together. So this is too quiet for me. So I'm gonna ask you to make some noise if you are in Professor Samra's class. Make some noise for her anyway. Pretend you're in her class. How many people here would like to give a shout out to Dr. Brophy? Oh, that's some yelling, for Professor Armas. Yes, and for Mrs. Cranbuell, Professor Cranbuell is here as well in the house. Wonderful. All right, thank you. I feel better when I hear a little bit of feedback. You know, after teaching on Zoom for a couple of years, we all went a little zombie-like. So it's good to have everybody here gathered. So today we're talking about a grant that Trtiton College received from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Basically, the federal government gave us $100,000. Cheer for money. We like money. The story behind this grant is that Trtiton requires all of our students to have human diversity credit in order to graduate, but we noticed that we didn't have enough classes here and choices for students to get those diversity credits. So we wrote a grant, which is a way of asking for support and money. And the grant said that we wanted to build courses that provided those credits for our students, and our proposal was accepted. So we got the money and we went about creating the classes. So I was able to pull on the support of colleagues that I've worked with for years, who I think are among our many amazing faculty. And we decided to create these classes that would make that credit. But that wasn't really all we were going to do. Instead of just creating classes that created a certain credit, that's like checking a box. We decided we wanted to go much further in this project. And so we met every single month and we talked about what we could put in those classes, which would be the kind of content that our students actually really want. All of us have been teaching at Trtiton for at least 10 years. And so we know that students are deeply curious about topics like, why is the world the way it is? Why do some people have power and others don't? How did power get distributed? How do everyday people get more empowered in their own lives? Whether somebody's going to study sonography, or they want to be in technology, or they're an automotive student, or they'd like to be a professor of English when they grow up, any of these careers or career paths, your education is about your career training, but it's also about what type of a human are you choosing to educate yourself to be, going out into the world. And so we wanted to create classes that would give students a chance to explore the things that really matter to them personally, and classes that would also touch on their individual identities. Trtiton is an extremely diverse college with students from all socioeconomic, racial, ethnic, and religious backgrounds. We have plenty of students here who are people of color, who are first generation, who have immigrated to this country on their own. We have students who are LGBTQ. We have students who are gender nonconforming. We have students who are neurodivergent. And so we wanted to create classes where the content would actually reach these different parts of our students' identities, stories, ancestry, history, so that students could be empowered in their future, who they are today and who they want to be becoming. So that was one of the goals of our grant. The other goal was that if we were going to do this kind of work, we weren't going to teach our classes in the same old boring way that maybe we were taught to teach classes. We wanted to make classes where the approach was not just somebody lecturing with a PowerPoint and students trying to memorize, but classes where there were projects that students could engage in, classes where the approach to the classroom was dialogue with every student involved. So we approach these classes and the construction of these classes in a very different way. And I'm happy to say that we've had a lot of support in doing so. We've had the support of our president, Mary Rita Moore, of our vice presidents, Susan Campos and Jody Coslow Martin, in addition to many of the other administrators and faculty, the grants office, the Dean's Office in Arts and Sciences. With all of this support behind us, we began a 4-year project, and then the pandemic happened. Wah, wah. And so we persisted, and so we made the classes anyway. And so the first time we got to teach them in the classroom, it was the first time anybody had been in a class in a year and a half. So that was fun. And through this process, I'm actually going to move to the next slide. It's not working. Hey, look, magic of collaboration. So through this process, we were able to create and offer the classes. Most of us have had the opportunity to teach the classes 3 different times. So I'm going to introduce the faculty, and then they're going to speak about how they took a different approach to the classroom, how after over 10 years of teaching, they took these 4 years to put together classes that were based on years of knowledge, but also an idea of doing something else. So I wrote this grant with Professor Maxi Armas. He has been a Spanish teacher and the chairman of a languages department here at Trtiton for years, but he also went back to school during his time at Trtiton, and he got a graduate degree in Latin American and Latino studies. So instead of teaching Spanish, through this grant, he started putting together a program at Trtiton for Latin American and Latino studies. Dr. Christina Brophy is another teacher who has been working on this grant. As a historian, her background is doing research in folklore and mythology and storytelling. During a Fulbright that she had, she explored archives. So when she was a graduate student, she explored archives that talked about how the stories people tell come to make meaning and empower them in their lives. So as a historian who was focused on story, she made a class about sex, race, and gender in the United States, but that class is focused on storytelling and the creation of oral histories. So the students in her class get to do a project where they're recording history of somebody that they choose. Professor Gail Cranebuell is an activist and also a womanist theologian who does a lot of work in the greater Chicago community. Professor Cranebuell has taught English composition for many years. And as much as you guys like writing freshman essays, it's that exciting to read them year after year after year. And so she wanted to do this job plus something else. So Professor Cranebuell put together a co-requisite course for Rhetoric 097 and 101 together. And while the students are building their writing skills, which, as you know, is something that's not always the most fun, but is very important because writing is thinking, she also wanted the class to be about something. As a theologian, as a philosopher, and as an activist, she chose the topic of Black resistance as the theme that students would learn about while they were writing, so that they had something deep that they were able to engage with as they were doing the writing process. And then I'll finish with Professor Lisa Samra, who teaches our speech classes, Speech 101, also has a very rich background in performance and theater. And so instead of just offering speech classes, she decided to offer a course that is focused on theater, performance, diversity, and the radical power that performance has to change people's minds and to change people's lives. So 3.5 years after we got this grant, the courses are now in their third cycle. And if there's anything that we've learned after being in the classroom with our students, is that even after years of teaching, we still have plenty to learn. When we step out from behind the podium and we engage with our students on a more personal level, when we engage with their ideas and their dreams and their fears, we find that our approaches in the classroom also have to change. The more our students give us feedback, really the more we learn about the different directions we should be taking their learning in. So I've asked faculty to share with you today the different approaches they took in building these classes. So in this moment, I'm going to turn it over to each faculty member to speak briefly. I always like to tell people what's going on. They're each going to speak for about 5 minutes. Then we're going to do some time for questions and answers. And then I have an activity for each table to do together. So you'll get to meet the people at your table toward the end of this presentation. Okay, so with that, I'll introduce our first speaker. It's Professor Gail Cranbiel, who's going to speak to us today about her course.
I think this is on. Hopefully it's okay if I speak to you seated. First of all, thank you so much for coming. Welcome to the symposium. We're really excited about this culminating project that we're doing, and we're really excited about engaging with you. We've been thinking about these courses for a really long time, so it's to have you here. My name is, as you heard, Gail Cranbiel, and the way I have thought about my role as an educator comes from, do you want to see the slide? If it's up yet? That's okay. It comes from, I'll wait for the, it comes from my favorite educator and feminist and thinker and writer and professor. If you don't know the name Bell Hooks, write it down. She has tons of books that are accessible. Some of my favorites, All About Love, Feminism is for Everybody. But the one that has guided my teaching pedagogy is the book called Teaching to Transgress. And in that text, she says that the classroom remains is the most radical space. And I really, and I really am, I've guided my philosophy around teaching as a site for radicalism, for revolution. I think what happens in the classrooms is the most important, impactful thing that happens on campus, period. I take my responsibility as one of the 2% of women, Black women who are tenured professors in the country very seriously. Very few women who look like me get to stand in front of you for lots of reasons. And so I take that extremely seriously. I take it as a responsibility. I know I stand in the tradition of Harriet Tubman, who was a Moses. I know I stand in the tradition of Sojourner Truth, who said, "Ain't I a woman?" I know I stand in the tradition of Ida B. Wells, who said, Black women aren't safe. I know I stand in the tradition of Fannie Lou Hamer, who said she was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I stand in the tradition of Alicia Garza, who said Black Lives Matter. I know what it means to embody this body in front of you. And so I take that really seriously. And I understand that our struggle as Black women, as Black people, has guided the struggle of every group throughout history. That every marginalized group looks to our struggle for inspiration. And so thinking about that, I believe it is incumbent on me. I think it's my responsibility to fully stand in who I am, to fully stand and embody my positionality as a Black woman in this space. And it would be a wasted opportunity for that not to be reflected in my teaching. And I do, some people say that, that I don't lead with that. I do. I lead with who I am. I lead with that tradition. And when we had the opportunity to create this curriculum, I leaned into that. So Black women's resistance is, of course, singular. It is about a specific people at a specific time, but it is also universal. So I wanted to use writing, and I also think about writing when we talk about education as a practice of freedom. Bell Hooks also said that, is that I am not interested in teaching students to write to get a job or to pass a course or to move. All those things are add-ons. Those are all nice to have. It's important so for you to finish college and get a degree and all of those things, but that's not why we write. And that's not what I want you to think of in my class as a writer. I want you to think of the fact that your writing is your voice. Your writing is you. And your voice is singular. Nobody else can write and communicate the way that you do. Nobody can say it like you do. Nobody has the experiences that you bring to the written word like you do. And so as I embody who I am, I want to encourage my students to fully embrace who they are through the written text. So grammar is a means so that people will take you seriously. So when I teach grammar, it's not so that you can follow rules, and no, it's so that people will take you seriously and will listen to what you have to say, right? I want to empower and amplify your voice. So grammar is a tool. The essay is a tool. All those things are a tool, but what's important is that you use writing as a space to question, as a space to explore your own identity. And I use the lens of Black women's resistance and those themes as a way for you to do that. So I might start with Fannie Lou Hamer, but I want you to move beyond her and think about how her story can help you resist in your own life. Does that make sense? Okay, that's what I do.
Hi, everyone. If you can hear me, clap one time. Let's try that again. If you can hear me, clap one time. Well done. Anyone here who knows me, you should never give me a microphone. I'm so sorry for you all. Don't be scared. It's going to be fine. I want to start by talking a little bit about, and I'm assuming, oh, I have a slideshow coming up. I want to tell you a little story about the day I interviewed to work here. It was 2006, and I had my interview suit on. I came in, it was one of the classrooms here. I had a hiring committee, and there was a list of questions. And anyone who's working here right now, you know that there's a pre-approved list of questions. They're typed out. People have to read them the very same way to you every single time. And there was one question that I knew was going to be coming. It was the diversity question, right? Those of you who work here, you know, the diversity question in the hiring process. So I was ready for that question. I exactly remember the question, but I remember that I had something to say. It was very idealistic. I said, diversity should not be an imperative or a checkbox that we need to check off. It is part and parcel of what we do every day and in every action. And I was wrong, and I was right. I was wrong. I was right in the sense that that is what it should be. We should have diversity intertwined with all of our actions and interactions as professors and administrators. But I was wrong in the sense that Without that checkbox, and I know it sounds reductive, people may not be exposed to that dialogue. We have to be explicit about addressing questions of power, inequity, privilege, all of that. So, and then I went and did my teaching sample. I presume it was good because I'm standing here today in 2022. So that was my first, those are some of my early thoughts. And then this project came along and I had a chance to sort of put my words in action. So what I want to do is introduce some of the strategies that I used, and not all of the strategies, but I'm just representing one facet of the course creation of SPE 134, diversity and theater and performance. So in the course, as you heard, we do examine inequity, power, and privilege through the lens of performance, through doing performance, through looking at performance. And again, what we call performance is something that we actually have to talk about. Like this right now is a performance. We also talk about the authority of classroom structures. Like I'm standing up high and you're down there and I have a mic. What changes when I go down here, right? Okay, I still have a mic, so I'm kind of still in control. But how about right here? How you doing? All right, I'm Lisa. Keeping it real. So one of the ways we try to think about this is ways we can disrupt normal classroom practices to give an opening to students to explore things in a different way. So one of the underlying concepts that we were talking about in some of our meetings leading up to teaching the courses is transparent teaching and the collaborative classroom. So I'm going to talk briefly about how collaboration factored into this class in terms of two things, in terms of grading and in terms of incorporating choice. So I'm going to start with grading. This is where I do my slide part. I have speech students here. So I want to make sure that you guys see that I'm nervous and that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So the Guaranteed B approach is part of a larger school of thought called awareness pedagogy. I learned about it at a conference with Professor Kristen Blinny, and she actually, it was prior to her book coming out, but the book is called Grading Justice, Teacher Activist Approaches to Assessment. And so it is part of what this a larger approach called awareness pedagogy, which asks professors to really sort of take apart traditional grading structures. So the Guaranteed B approach, the way it works is that you start the class with a B. You don't start with 0 and work your way up. You start the class with a B. And then the work that you do is either a B, better than a B, or not quite a B. And so that might seem to you just the same thing as grading, or the old, if you were in elementary school, the check plus, check minus. But it's a little bit different because worked into this is a revision. So what if someone has a less than a B, then they are given the opportunity to revise. So as a class, we come up with what the requirements are, what makes something a B. So in this way, we try to sort of demystify the process of grading. A lot of people enter into a class and they just feel like there's points. So this class has no points. This class, and one of the other things that happens with doing this kind of Guaranteed B grade is it separates or decouples or divorces grades and feedback. You know, that grades become part of a conversation that each instructor has with each student. So that it's not about like, you got this grade and it's over. You got this grade, here's what it is. And now let's talk about where it could be to maintain your B. Everyone has obviously the choice to maintain or not. So besides relying on revision and exploration to increase the grade, it really makes the focus on improvement over time. So this is also known as process-based grading, and it does sort of highlight that the process is the important thing to value, and particularly when we're talking about exploring and having dialogue around issues of power, hierarchy, inequality. It's very important that we have room for those discussions and those individuals to grow. So the second part of collaboration was incorporating choice. So one of the things, oh, thank you very much. One of the things I wanted to do was do a kind of choose your own adventure style for the class. And one of the things that we did is we started to make up what kinds of things could constitute a final project. And so in this particular case, you know, sometimes art is the scholarship. It's art, art about a concept, but it is the scholarship. So students had a choice. They could give presentations and many other things besides. So I'm going to give you some samples, but just before I show you some samples, I just wanted to say that, you know, using multiple means of expression is a well-known phenomenon. It's called universal design for learning. It's been going on for many, many years, but it's my first chance to sort of apply it in this context. So let me go ahead and show a few samples of some of the things that were happening in my class. I don't have anyone's names here, but some of the folks are here right now. So this first presentation was a final presentation where the student wanted to research colorism in novellas. Those of you who watch telenovelas will know that there's a very clear color of the skin organization for characters. She also noted that there was a double standard, that actually men in the telenovelas were allowed to be darker more so than the women. So I think it was a really great analysis. Another presentation was about colorblind casting and non-traditional casting in some Broadway shows and how that impacts what we understand about gender. And then there's this really special movie called A Silent Voice, which one student of mine really wanted to talk about. I'm like, how is this going to fit into diversity? How does this work? You know, I got to meet with all of the students. And so in the end, this paper was so beautifully written and really pulled together great ideas about neurodivergence, about mental health, and about suicide and bullying. And I thought that this was a really unique way to approach a final project. A pechacucha, some of you might know what a pechacucha is. They're really old, but it's basically a 20 by 20 slideshow where the person has a certain amount of time to talk. And this particular, I'm not going to play it, but this particular pechacucha was about equal representation in Disney movies. We had a solo performance about comedy and the performance of stand-up comedy and diversity in comedy, really asking questions about what's funny, what's not, how are boundaries pushed in this situation, what's okay to say. And then we had a wonderful flowing rhyming example from a student who is here right now and really wove together some great issues of microaggression and many other ideas besides. I also allowed students to make annotated bibliographies. One student decided to talk about code switching and coded Black characters in anime. You can see that anime was very exciting for a lot of the people today. I started to love anime as a result of this class. Thank you guys very much. And also talking about Latinx, Latine, stereotypes in TV and film. So there are many other projects as well. I just wanted to highlight some of those because I'm so proud of what the students really came up with. I really felt like I was your guide, and some of those students are here right now. And so I just feel so grateful for the work that you put into that. And I hope that the collaborative practices that I put in place there really helped you have a space to do that. And some of the things, so I do want to conclude right now and just say that I had a great time. I'll close with this. Let's say that. Oh, let me just also thank my colleagues because we worked together the whole time. And I want to thank Dr. Collins for managing the grant, and of course, the National Endowment for the Humanities for supporting us. So if you can hear me, clap once. If you like the idea of this approach, clap twice. If you feel so or meh about this approach, clap 3 times, be honest. Really? Okay, and then lastly, just clap real loud for me because that's what you do when a presenter is.
Thank you, Lisa. Now we know why we always, when we give the microphone to Lisa, this is what you expect. A great job, like just she did. And hello, my name is Maxi Armas. I've been teacher, I instructor at Trtiton College for more than 20 years. And although I started as a Spanish teacher, my passion has always been Latino and Latin American studies. And that's why not only I have a degree in Spanish language, then another one in Latin American literature, and just recently in 2016, a Latino Latin American studies. Why? Because I'm interested in how the journey of Latinos takes place in this Western hemisphere, right? The journey of Latinos started a long time ago, 1492 accidentally, and in the 1600s intentionally, right? Accidentally in the Caribbean and intentionally in the East Coast of what's now United States. How did that happen? Well, it's a journey, right? And that's what we study in the class that we have, that we developed thanks to the NEH. How does that affect us, right? Well, all the topics that you hear right now in the news or otherwise about immigrants, about immigration, about Latinos, about race, Latinos are in every front of these discussions. Why is that? Well, that's what we study in the class. Those of you who are here from my class are witnesses of that. And the way we study in my class is not a traditional way. I don't lecture, right? It's pretty much everybody contributes, the students are involved. And the idea is that this will aid students to develop critical thinking. That means you have a voice, you have things to say. In the classroom, you say it, and you say it to other classmates, well, we listen to yours, and that's how conversation goes into delving together, changing together into understanding the realities of Latinos now in the United States. It's an introductory course, but also it's interdisciplinary, meaning that we use history, sociology, we use economy, and we use even geography to understand, how Latinos ended up here in what's now United States. And so in the next slide, we're gonna see, maybe I can change it. Yeah. All right, let's see. It's a journey. So we explore things as a colonialism, right? And both in Latin America by the Europeans, the Spaniards, and the East Coast, the United States by the Anglo-Americans, right? So the Anglos and the Spaniards studied this long time ago, and here we are. How do we got to this? That's what we studied in our class, right? And so the inequalities studied long time ago, since the very beginning. But who benefited and who didn't? And that's what we study in our classes. When the students come into the class, I notice every semester is different, but some semesters, students are still waiting for the teacher to just load into them all kinds of wisdom pearls of information. And in my class, we slowly begin to disassemble that and start empowering the students to listen to their own voice. And so start thinking about themselves, about Latinos, not just one Latino group, right? Because, Latinos are extremely diverse. First of all, from the get-go in Latin America, there was all kinds of fusion between Afro-descendants, indigenous, and Europeans. That's what Latin Americans are, just to name three of the roots of Latinos. Imagine the diversity. And eventually, we end up here in the United States. And go to the next one, Antonio, please. I got it. So what is the diversity then? Well, we explore this in our course, because we have people from 20 different countries that are from Latin America, that history tells us that for the most part, US interventions and inventions in these countries destabilize these places in a way that a lot of people find it impossible to live a life there. And so they migrated to the United States, to the mainland here. And so when that happens, right, the Latinos that we're here, we're from every group you can imagine, like I say, European, indigenous, African, and others. And so when Latinos here in the United States are studying themselves, or we studying ourselves, we had to understand the dynamic, how that works, how do Latinos evolve now in the United States. And so we talk about issues of race, gender, social class, and then we tend to understand and try to understand in our classes, how does that affect the policies in the United States? You all notice my colleague Gail that mentioned about the struggle of African Americans and how they inspire other groups. That's one of the things we also learn in my class, right? How Mexican Americans or Chicanos and Puerto Ricans and other Latinos were inspired by these movements, especially the civil rights movements, and how Latinos have been organized and joined the struggle in recognition in this country. So every time you think about immigrants, immigrants come from everywhere, right? But right now, when you hear the word immigrant, you tend to think about Latinos, which is part of the immigrant experience. And by the way, Puerto Ricans and Mexicans are both immigrants and people who have been here since the very beginning. That's the type of things we learn in our classes. And so if you're not enrolled in my classes in Latin American studies, remember that Trtiton is a Hispanic serving institution. The majority of students right now currently in Trtiton are Latino. And there's a lot of universities right now that are studying Latin American studies and offering this as a degree, as a career. So thank you.
Okay, well, hi, I'm Dr. Christina Brophy, and I'm here to talk about Humanities 175, race, class, and gender in the United States. And before well, let's see. All right, I'm seeing myself. It's a little, all right, a second ago. There we go. Okay. Okay, so I guess I just want to speak for a moment before getting into it about, no, let's see, there we go. Okay, about why I designed this class and what this grant is about. As Dr. Collins and Professor Armis have talked about, our college is a majority minority institution. So most of the students that we serve are today from historically marginalized groups. That's very different than when I started at Trtiton College in 2005. Okay, please nobody say they were born in 2005 because that will be a little bit hard for me. So it was really important in the class that I designed to change the center of academic work, to recenter voices that have been historically marginalized, especially because these are the communities that Trtiton serves. So I designed this problem to address academic alienation. I think this one's skipping. Is it okay? All right, so I addressed this, all right, there we go. Okay, just have to be a little taller. To address the problem of academic alienation as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Too often, college students feel disconnected from classes that have failed to acknowledge their communities and their backgrounds. This is especially the case for students from historically marginalized communities. Disconnection is in part caused by the limitations of traditional curriculum. Many traditional educational materials support a white supremacist, male-dominated, classist, and heterosexist worldview. In addition, traditional curriculum often distorts, omits, and stereotypes the knowledges and experiences of people of the global majorities. I sought to address the disconnection and the limitations of traditional curriculum. Oops, I don't think it is. I sought to address the disconnection and the limitations of traditional curriculum by shifting the center of academic work so that it is more representative of students' experience and more relevant to students' lives. This course focuses on past and contemporary injustices as related to race, class, gender, and sexuality by listening to the voices of marginalized individuals. In this course, every reading aims to disrupt oppressive systems of racism, classism, sexism, heterosexism, ableism, as well as the ways that those isms, those oppressive isms intersect and combine. This course examines the scholarship and the experiences of those who've been historically marginalized in the United States, specifically Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And I've got the beginning of a list here. Now, the list that I'm showing you is not exhaustive. I just thought it'd be too much if I put absolutely everybody's name in there. But not just Black, Indigenous, and people of color, also LGBTQ individuals, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and queer individuals, as well as immigrants, refugees, and migrants, and those who identify as women. Now, just to clarify, many of the individuals on these slides whose names I've listed could have been listed under multiple categories. I just was trying to give you an idea of the layout of the course. Another way that this course centers marginalized voices is through examining, collecting, and analyzing the life stories of marginalized individuals. The method that informs the collection of life stories of historically marginalized groups is called counter storytelling. So I know it looks like a typo, but that's on purpose. The counter story is a tool for exposing and challenging oppressive narratives and justifications of white supremacy, male domination, classism, and heterosexism. As well as functioning to empower and liberate tellers and audiences, counter storytelling can engender cultural survival and resistance. Oral history archives house rich collections of counter stories. Over the course of the semester, students are required to select 4 individual interviews to examine and analyze from this list of online archives. And so, oops, well, you can see most of it there. So we start off with the Black Women Oral History Project. Then there are some choices, some in English, some in Spanish. When we turn to the Latinx community, then we switch gears and go look at the Queer Network Oral History Project and the Feminist Freedom Warriors. Finally, all students are required to complete a living knowledge project where they personally collect counter stories. The individual each student has to select must be a person of color who identifies as a woman and or as LGBTQ. Ideally, the individual should be an immigrant or refugee to the United States or someone who has migrated within the United States. Then through a multi-step process, students are required to research their informant's historical and cultural context, meet with their informant 4 to 5 times to collect life narratives, and eventually submit a 6 to 10 page paper relating their research, summaries and direct quotations from their informants, as well as analysis of the stories of their informant at the end of the course. So informed by our study of race, class, gender, and sexuality in the US. And so far, I'm thrilled to report that the projects have been outstanding. It's a little bit complicated to show you excerpts or bits of projects when students have engaged in oral history. We need to have an attorney involved with official releases before I can demonstrate that information publicly, but that is something that I hope to do. I hope in the future, Trtiton College could become a repository for the collected counter stories that students here have made. And as Dr. Collins has talked about, this NEH grant, the point of this NEH grant is to provide more compelling curriculum for all of you, but it's also ultimately to change our institution, to make it so that it better serves the students who we have. Hopefully we've accomplished that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Brophy and other professors for your presentations. We're going to open it up to a little bit of question and answer for the panel, but I know it's also awkward when the presenter says, "Are there any questions?" And then it's like, are there? So I'm going to start off with a couple I had prepared. And then I'm going to ask if people who are in attendance have any questions that came up for them from this performance. So you guys can just pass the microphone. But my first question for the faculty was, after you taught the class the first time, what did you realize you should be doing differently? What changes did you make after you taught the class the first time? You can see I don't use microphones very often.
One thing that I did is that there's so much. I had so many reading assignments that the class is a composition class. And so I had to pare back and really make it so that the students did more of the research, and they identified stories of resistance that represented LGBTQ, trans, Chicano, Latinx, Black women. I wanted them to do some research around resistance in different ways. So I realized that I could not present all that I wanted to, so I had to pare it back considerably. I didn't get to all the things I wanted to do. So that's what I learned.
For me, the class only really was able to have enough registrants one time, the very first time. So I only got to pilot the class. I would love to see you all in a future version of that class. But one of the things that, and that was during the pandemic. And so we were all in masks. We had one day that was a remote meeting and one in person. So if I were to do it again, I would do it definitely all in person, which allows us to see more live theater and do more live performances with greater freedom. So I would definitely do that differently.
Yes, it is an ongoing process. I assess my classes. I do some assessment in order to find out what worked and what didn't at the end of the semester. And so if something didn't work, then I'll just adjust it for the following. And so far it's working.
For me, I feel like it takes me a few times through a class to really hit my stride. So I felt like the first 2 times I taught the class, students should have to pay less tuition. But I was a joke, but you know, it's all right. No need to laugh. It takes me a while to get it takes me a while to collect sort of anecdotes and examples that make the readings more digestible. The analogies. So it takes me a few times to get up to speed on the pop culture references that work to explain something, as well as different analogies to draw for students.
The next question, I'm going to see if our audience has some question. Lisa and I are playing talk show. She's Oprah. And I'm Ricky Lake.
You get a B, you get a B, you get a B.
Do we have any questions or comments from the audience?
Well, it's more than a question, it's just a comment. I'm a student of Trtiton, of course, and I have a beautiful daughter. She's 3 years old, and she's starting to ask why. Everything is why, and why not. And I think as we grew up, we we lost that wonder, of knowing things. So I think we start living the life we live because we have to, because our parents did it, because this is our culture, and we don't ask why. And I think these classes is gonna break that chain of why, and not just living because we are here. So I really I took diversity theater with teacher Lisa, Professor Lisa, and I love the class. It's not about just making a play or anything. So if you're scared of theater, no, it's not like that. She will give you the option to, like write if you don't want to talk or things like that. And I was hearing the other professors sound so interesting. And I just recommend you, all of you, to start asking why, like don't stop wonder.
Thank you so much. Can you tell us your name?
Yeah, it's Tania Musso, and I'm gonna be a teacher. So, so I hope one day a teacher or something.
Thank you so much, Tanya. See, this is why we learn as teachers that our students' voices are very powerful. I always notice in my classes that I'll be talking about something and then I'll ask them to share their thoughts or ideas on it. And my students are often much more heartfelt and articulate than my way of presenting. So I always like that in classes when students speak. I feel like other students get the idea in a different way from the way that I might say it. Other questions? We have one over here.
I want to ask the question of, do we, instead of wanting to be inclusive, do we ask the question of why not being inclusive? Like, why do we not agree with the certain topics that are being taught? Like with racism, like do we try to teach why the thought of racism is the right and not wrong? Like where other people's mindset is instead of where it is. Are we always trying to protect instead of unprotect? Like just get a different point of view of how people are thinking instead of just dogging everything that's happening, but just seeing why it is happening.
I think I understand your question, but let me ask it back and you can tell me if I have it clearly. You're asking the larger question of, do we talk about why or how things like racism or lack of inclusion are structured? Is that your question? So I'll leave that to the panel.
Hold on,
to
and
answer.
if
Go
I
ahead.
think it's like, because today's society is that everything that someone does is wrong. It's like if I don't agree with the way you believe, I'm wrong. But so why is the way that someone believes is automatically wrong instead of you trying to include why they think that way? Like the Bible says that homosexuals are wrong, but if I believe it's wrong, why, if I don't believe it, now that you say it's right, I'm wrong for believing what the Bible says.
Well, I think one of the interesting thing that comes out of that is this concept of polarization. And one of the things I think all of us have done is really try to make room for context, individual histories and stories to understand, because the goal is not to be polarizing or necessarily politically strident, but the goal is really to open up a dialogue that truly is not new at all. It's not political at all. It's been going on for 50 or 60 years in the liberal arts. So it's not a niche new idea. Sorry, I'm not supposed to be talking. It's Dr. Brophy. Yes to you.
No, that's well, LaShawn, what a great question. So it's a little bit confusing in the current political climate that we live in. And sometimes when you watch the news, they'll bring up a topic and they'll have one person speak to one side of the issue and then somebody talk to the other side of the issue. And we can call that a really sophisticated term like both sidism. And now in an academic context, in certain discussions, we want to get everybody's point of view, but we have to make sure that what we present is backed up by academic research, that it's backed up by scholarly scholarly works. So it's a little bit different. It's not the same as it's not that all points of view don't have merit, but in an academic setting, we have to have scholarship that backs up our views. So we can't just say things that don't have foundation. So it's not a matter of a point of view being incorrect. It's what we elevate, what we focus on. And throughout your academic career, whenever you write a research paper, whenever you write an essay, you want to be supporting your opinions with scholarly work. That's what we do in an academic setting. It's not about right or wrong. It's more about what the scholarship leads you to conclude.
Yeah.
But great question.
We have another hand up over here. You start, why don't you start with your name?
Hello, everybody. For those of you all who do not know who I am, my name is W. I am a sophomore here at Trtiton Community College. Just a little background information about me. I'm involved in a few programs that are here on campus. Also an English tutor here. And then I'm also involved with new student orientation. Definitely wanted to, just give my thoughts and opinions on the symposium today. I actually have firsthand experience with Miss K as well as Miss Samra. I actually tutor in Miss K's class for her English 101 class. And then in regards to Miss Samra, I got an opportunity to be a part of her diversity and theater class was held in my first semester. I enjoyed my time thoroughly in the class. I mean, getting an opportunity to showcase my gifts, showcase my talents, and just my artistic expression, and having a space where I get to learn about the artistic expression of those around me was beautiful. I mean, I was in a classroom with singers, songwriters, comedians, just people who were doing anything creative, and just being able to pull from their energy and increase my own was a beautiful thing to have. I did not do so hot my first semester. I finished with a 1.8, and the only class that I did well in was the diversity class. Definitely now sitting in a different seat with a 3.3 right now. Thank you. But having, like I said, the opportunity to do what I do naturally, do what I love, and get a grade for it was just a bonus. In regards to being a part of Miss K's classroom and getting an opportunity to see her do her thing on a weekly basis, getting an opportunity to learn about Black resistance has been amazing for me. Definitely an English major as of right now. I do a lot of different writing. So learning about African-American literature has something that was not a part of my academic experience before I got an opportunity to be in her classroom. Understanding my Black culture, understanding who I am, learning my identity is something that I got an opportunity to do through just being in her presence. So all of the professors who are on the panel are great. The idea of diversity within the classroom is more than needed, because everybody wants to feel involved. Everybody wants to feel like what they're bringing to the table, to this institution, to the world matters. So having these spaces is more than a requirement. And I definitely encourage you all to take these classes, enjoy these classes, because I mean, I enjoy them. So.
Thank you, W. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So this just goes out to the panel, but one of the questions that I have is, would you say the goal of these classes is to bring a form of internalized awareness of one's identity and one's history of their marginalized group?
I would say yes, and also the marginalization of others, to sort of not just be aware of your own personal historical context. And I think I can answer, and you guys can add to that if you want, but I think it's about an awareness of the multitude of ways someone might be on the margins in society today.
Can you actually read your question again? I like it so much. I want to hear it one more time.
Oh, sorry. So my question was, would you say the goal of these classes is to bring a form of internalized awareness of one's identity and history of their marginalized group?
Yeah, that is such a profound and sophisticated question. And I think that's something that I work on with my students, is building that sense of curiosity. Like, why is it this way? But also I like the part where you said internalized. We all are born into a world that's in process. And we think everything's normal until we start to realize things are not right. And then we start to ask why. But then we begin to ask ourselves, so if these structures are violent, if these structures impoverish people, if these structures keep us in the darkness, how do we personally bring ourselves out? That's the larger journey of what we're hoping to teach in these classes, whether you're doing it through performance or learning Latin American history, or in my class, looking at artists from around the globe, or in Dr. Brophy's class, doing oral history, Mrs. Cranebill's class, learning about Black resistance. The overall structure is this: your education is for you personally to become the person that you choose to be. But in order to have those real and profound choices, you need to have a view that's larger than what society gave you by default. It's a journey. It's a path, as Professor Arma said. Really? That's why
I want to be in your class.
come on.
All right.
I need enrollment. We like to be accessible and use all the accessories that allow everybody to hear.
I just wanted to, again, thank you for that. And you remind me of, there's a definition of womanism in which Alice Walker writes in My Mother's Garden. She said that one of the definitions of womanism is a girl saying, I'm going to free myself. We're all going to Canada, and I am going to take everybody with me. What does that mean? I am going to move away. I understand that I'm oppressed. I want to get out of this space into a place of freedom, like Harriet Tubman did, freed herself. But the beautiful thing is when you take everybody with you, that's the internalized oppression, understanding where you're at. But once you free yourself, is bringing everybody that you can with you, bringing your people with you, bringing your generations with you, bringing your friends with you, bringing other marginalized people with you. So that is my hope for you. I love your question. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Noemi. As usual, your questions are always relevant and deep, like the one you just asked. Thank you. Again, you know, identity and other things, issues that we discuss do not come out of a vacuum, right? Out of nothing. It's a journey. It's a voyage that started, like I said earlier, a long time ago. And when we ourselves, especially our students, start delving into that and understanding the journey, the evolution of how we got here, we start deeper into that internalized identities that we have that we need to start understanding better. So, Noemi, thank you.
Well, unsurprisingly, we've gone a little bit longer than we thought with one part of the program, but we did want to hear from you. We're going to do two more things before we go today. I wanted to show you a little bit of the feedback that students gave from these courses. And because you can read, I don't need to read them to you. But I thought it was interesting to sort of look at some of the ideas that professors talked about, what they had wanted to do with the courses, actually came to fruition, like students feeling that they were not passive in the classroom, like students feeling like they had choice, and those choices allowed them to be creative in terms of constructing their own set of knowledge that they will need going out into the world. Most of your teachers are a different generation from you, and a lot of you will have careers that we don't even know what they are yet. Like your job title in 20 years is probably not something I could even think of right now. So constructing your own set of knowledge of what's useful to you is a very powerful tool. I really liked this comment because it shows us how what we're doing in the classroom, we think, oh, I have a gen ed, it's an elective, it's a required course, I just need to take it and check the box. But sometimes the concepts that you're being taught in general courses have to do with constructs in society that you will face no matter what your career is, like the student who's going into health careers and realizes that understanding systems of oppression is going to be powerful for her in interacting with her patients one day. Another student who said, similar to what Professor Armas said, and another student also said that being from a Latin American background doesn't necessarily It means that you know things from an experiential level, but sometimes also having some academic structure around that can offer students a deeper understanding, not just of their experience, but the experience of a larger group to which they belong. And finally, the comments from students who talk about who's presented as an expert in the classroom. We really tried in our work as professors to put together courses where the experts were 50% female, where LGBTQ academics, scholars, artists, and performers were highlighted in our courses, where the experts in our classes come from backgrounds other than the dominant background, so that people from all around the world and from cultures within the United States are represented in our classes. Before I end, I did want to say, though, that we did a survey with our students in the classroom, asking them some opinions and feelings about their time here on campus. And overall, our students recognize that our campus is extremely diverse, and that was a factor of being on campus that students appreciate, that no matter their background, they also find that they have a community here on campus. That was a very powerful feedback that we read, and very important. Things like Hispanic Heritage Month, which just happened, for example, brought wonderful programming to our students. Student Life and other programs that celebrate the backgrounds of our students. But students also noticed some things on campus that are important. And I'm going to mention these to you because the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to pass out a QR code and ask for your feedback live today. Actually, hold on. Okay, thank you so much. I've never had an assistant before. It's really nice. The job is now open for applications and the pay is in muffins. Just kidding. So I wanted to mention a few things before you begin scanning and answering, just to have you be thinking in particular. The survey is not about your general feelings. It's about the topics that we talked about today, particularly the way that classes are conducted, the content that they contain, and the voices that they highlight. Because students in the survey we did within our classes told us that it was very important to them to see more people of color as their professors in the classroom. While we do have diversity in our faculty, our students said they'd like to see more. A particular group that did not see themselves represented enough on campus was our LGBTQ students. And I know that from a survey, but I also know that because I've been having some very powerful conversations with students on campus about changes they'd like to see, ways that they could feel more supported here today at Trtiton. Another topic that students said was important was having more support for undocumented students, having support for first-generation students, those who are navigating college all on their own and could use more guidance in how to college, we could say. We know that we have the Center for Access and Accommodation, which is a very powerful support for students who require those services. But there's also a large population of neurodiverse students who don't fall under CAS. And having professors be more aware of issues of neurodiversity and how to engage students is a powerful issue that students brought up. This is why I'm a very strong believer in student feedback. When we ask students what they think, first of all, they tell us with great joy what their opinions are, and with a lot of sophistication. Our students are, as you've seen today, and because you are students, are very smart, talented, insightful, and observant people. And I feel like it's so important for our faculty and our campus to respect your intelligence in that way. But you also tell us things that I think we can find surprising, because your experience is different from what we assume it to be. And that's why we have to constantly be asking for your thoughts and for your ideas. In the classroom, students mentioned it's difficult for them to approach professors about their learning style. The power of a differential between students and faculty still means that a lot of conversations don't happen. And that's not students' responsibility to break that wall. It's faculty's responsibility. Students also talk about feeling alienated when they experience faculty who misgender them or who express hostility about ideas, like, for example, students with non-binary gender identities. This is a place where more work can happen on this campus. Also, and this one I thought was really powerful, knowing who to turn to specifically when they experience bias in the classroom or harassment on campus. Who is their go-to and who is the person to call? So those were ideas that students shared on the survey we did in classes. We made a more targeted survey today. So I hope you take it. You'll be able to see other people's feedback as well. But please know that the comments that you share are really a base for further conversations to make further changes on campus. So with that, I'll say make sure that you signed in if you're in one of our courses, or if you're in another course, you can sign in under other. We'll be collecting that. Take the survey, please. But before you go, give yourselves the loudest round of applause today for participating. Make noise. You have to yell. Woo! Louder, louder, more. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. And have a wonderful Tuesday.
Thank you.